Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cougar Talk. We've got a really great interview podcast planned for today. We have the esteemed Stan Johnson from Springfield, class of 1969. Stan, welcome to Cougar Talk.
Well, thank you, Ted. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Stan, I last saw you at the Springfield State basketball game. This is going back a few days ago. You and I happened to be on the opposing side, I think, but we were both up at certain times, kind of yelling to move our team forward. And I saw you. There's Stan in the stands.
Yeah, my wife was with me. We really enjoyed that game. We thought the Cougars played a great game, and just tough odds to beat a school like Bonner Prendy that can recruit and all of that. But I thought the team did a wonderful job.
They had a heck of a run through the districts and then the state. It was a lot of fun watching them. I wanted to point out that you're the voice of the Cougars with Don Cage. Why don't you just start off saying a little bit about that and kind of how you got started and what you think of that?
Yeah, in fact, Don Cage and I were trying to figure how long have we been doing that. We think it goes back better part of 25, maybe 30 years. It is really our honor to be able to broadcast the Cougar football and Cougar basketball, boys and girls. We've been doing it again for a long time. We really enjoy it. Don is probably the more talented broadcaster. He is really good. Seems to capture the flow of the game really well and doesn't stumble anywhere near as often as I do. But Don Mooney, Don Cage, and I just love the opportunity to do that. Honestly, we're kind of hoping for some younger blood coming along before too much longer. We've been doing it for a long time, but it gives us the opportunity to see the young athletes come up and start out as freshmen, in some cases sophomores, and just follow their careers. And to get to know the coaching staff a little bit. I think we're really lucky and honored to have some of the coaches that we have at the high school now and have had, in the recent past. It's just remarkable how good they've been and how well they work with the young people.
I agree. And I think our athletic program just kind of reflects the type of coaches and athletes we're getting through Springfield. And we're going to have a great opportunity to talk about that. When I started the podcast, Stan, I've only got 2 in the can now, but many people said that you should be the first person I should talk to. There's really no one better than you to not only have a bird's eye view of Springfield High School historically, but you've been you've been in Springfield from the 1680s, your ancestors, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But also somebody who's been in the trenches, school board for 30 years and really transforming Springfield into one of the best school districts in the state.
Thank you for that. It's it's been a real team effort, to use the athletic analogy.
Yeah.
It's the product that we have now is excellent. I think we can compare ourselves to most districts in the state. Even the Ranners and the different east towns of the state, which traditionally are held up there. But we don't spend as much money as they do. We spend what we think is a reasonable amount from a school board perspective, but boy, the product that is put out there academically, athletically, socially, I think we can compare our district to almost any district in the state. And recently, with a lot of hard work by our facilities committee, our facilities are as good as anybody's in terms of the gymnasiums, the fields, with the building of the new high school and all the associated facilities. We're really blessed. We're really fortunate.
Yeah. I love going up to the new high school and hanging out there watching games. It's really a spectacular facility. And we'll talk about that. But just to start off, Stan, just want to thank you on behalf of Springfield Township and Springfield residents. There's probably not another person that's given more time and service volunteering to Springfield Township than you have. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ted. And I don't want to miss our compatriots from Morton Borough. They've contributed a lot. Given the relatively small size of Morton Borough, they've produced some phenomenal athletes there and coaches. And it is the Springfield School District, but our friends in Morton just do a fabulous job for us.
Well said. And I have two from Morton coming up on the podcast, so look forward to that. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Morton became a part of the Springfield family. And I really think about it as that way. I mean, it's really been this integration of two different townships into Springfield High School that has really been special.
It has, and again, it's great support from the folks there in terms of their leadership and the athletes and all that. It's really been it was a rocky start, but it's really worked well, and congratulations to the folks in Springfield and in Morton.
So this is the part that I need to kind of look over your resume here, Stan. So just be humble for a second while I go through a brief paragraph I'm going to read. Just will set people up and help people understand where you've come from and what kind of service you've done to Springfield. And then we'll get into the history, which is as impressive. So I'm just going to read this. A graduate of the class of 1969, Stan and the Johnson family have a long history of service in the Springfield community and school district. Stan serves as director of the Springfield School Board for 28 years, including president for many years. He's been a member of the District Facilities Committee for over 30 years and was part of the team that developed master plans for both the Springfield Literacy Center and the new high school. Stan was also a founding board member of the Springfield Area Education Foundation, SAFE, that was organized in 2005. He served as president from its inception through 2019 and coordinated the funding for the high school stadium lights provided by SAFE. Stan is also a member of the Volunteer Memorial Wall Committee that honors individuals for their service provided to the community. Stan has been honored and inducted on the wall for his contributions to the community and district. Stan's graduated Lafayette College. His family are lifelong residents of Springfield, and his children are graduates of Springfield schools. So there you go, Stan. Well done.
Accurate.
So I'll start off with a big question. Where does all that kind of decommitment to serving the community come from, Stan? Like, where do you look back in your life and think about where does that come from?
Probably have to give a lot of the credit for that to my mom. She was affectionately known as the candy lady. She used to sell candy and drinks and whatnot at the football games and at the basketball games, and help her sometimes when I was young, and then as I got older, I was participating in a lot of those events. So yeah, she got tremendous satisfaction from working with the kids and the coaches and the teams, and it set a clear model for me that you get what you give, and I've tried to live my life that way. My wife Carol has been very supportive. She understands that there will be times when I will need to go back or go to Springfield and give back a little bit, because they certainly helped shape me into the husband and the father that I have been in my years, and I consider myself, again, very blessed.
Well said. One of my earliest memories, Stan, of going to Springfield High School is watching Dave Batten, who was class of 74, and my dad would take me to the games at the old Blue Gym. And invariably, my memory is kind of walking up to that area, and Mr. Eggy, I think, was taking tickets, and you'd buy your tickets right there at the door. You'd walk in, and then I think to the right there, that's where your mother's little candy thing would be. And I certainly remember her presence and her smile and her selling candy. So I do have that in my memory bank somewhere. It's really special.
I think the dentist in the town probably objected to that, but she loved being with the kids and how excited the kids would be. And then at halftime, of course, she'd get flooded with people coming out to get something to wet their whistle or whatever, and she just loved it. And awful lot of fond memories helping her load up the car, take the stuff over, and then after the games, put it back in the car and take it home. She just thrived on that.
And talk a little bit about what that funded. That was bench warmers early on. What
Yeah,
was that?
she and a bunch of the parents formed an organization called the Benchwarmers, and the proceeds from those candy sales and the hot chocolate and whatnot at the football games paid for the Benchwarmers, and the Benchwarmers would provide jackets for the athletes that they wore, proudly. And then there was a banquet at the end of the year. It used to be at the actually at our house initially at
Hmm,
420 Prospect Road, and then they
amazing.
expanded and they went to the Alpine Inn and other places in Springfield that could hold a crowd. And the intent was to honor the athletes and honor the coaches that developed a real strong foundation that we're benefiting from today.
And I remember those uh, back in when I was going to school in the 80s. It was always a big honor to be invited to the benchwarmers and be honored in that banquet. Which back in the day, you didn't go out to dinner very often. Like today, kids go out all the time, and it's really nothing special. But I remember the benchwarmers banquet being kind of a cool idea that you would go out to dinner and be served, and then be honored at the banquet. So that was a huge accomplishment if you were able to do that.
Yeah, she worked really hard at it and was very proud of that. And it was very much for our family a highlight of the calendar of the year to put that all together and then uh, get the positive reaction from the athletes, their parents, the coaches. It was just wonderful.
That's great. Well, I usually go back in people's history, and it starts kind of at your birth date, which would be in 1950. But we're going to jump back an additional 200 years, Stan, to to when your ancestors. I'm a little bit ancestry in my own home, but it's rare that you find a family like the Johnson family that was one of the original founders or landowners in Pennsylvania. So, if you wouldn't mind, just give an idea of where you guys have come from. I mean, you mentioned the charter from William Penn, but
Yeah, well, I can start actually back in the 1300s in Scotland. Our our family descended from the Irving clan from the town outside of Aberdeen in northeastern Scotland. Um, they were they worked with and were associated with William Wallace, if you're familiar with that at all, and
yeah,
Robert the
sure.
Bruce from Scottish history. Robert the Bruce actually gave our clan, the Irving clan, a castle, and that castle was outside of Aberdeen. And my wife and I visited that a few years ago, and it's just amazing.
Yeah,
It dates back that far, and the family occupied that castle until the 1800s. Um, but anyway, the family left that part of Aberdeen or that part of Scotland and eventually moved to Wales in England, where they became members of the Quaker religion. And that's where they befriended William Penn. And in 1680s, they purchased land from William Penn and moved to the United States. The Quakers were being persecuted by the Anglican Church in England, so many of them had the opportunity to buy land from William Penn in Pennsylvania. So they bought 600 acres from William Penn in what is now Springfield and actually crosses over into Marple Township. They also bought a small parcel on Walnut Street downtown. That was part of the deal. William Penn would sell you a small parcel where you could have a street front property on Walnut Street in Philadelphia, around the 500 block, not too far from what is now Independence Hall. And there was a 600-acre parcel again in Springfield, and it's in the area where Rolling Green Golf Club is, up to where Cardinal O'Hara is. So they owned that for many years, and then started subdividing, selling off pieces. The Coppock family, Bartholomew Coppock, was the gentleman who purchased the land from William Penn. He eventually sold to his son, and his son built what was known as the Coppock House, in that part of Marple where the Don Guanella School was located by Cardinal O'Hara. So Springfield, Marple, yes, our family goes way back in this area.
Amazing.
Most of them eventually moved out to more fertile ground. The soil in Springfield was not very good. It was pretty rocky, a lot of clay, and they heard and saw the fertile land that was out in Chester County and Lancaster County, and that's where they moved. They were essentially farmers and worked out there. Another branch of my family were millers, and they ran the mills, and they built mills along Chester Creek, Darby Creek, Brandywine Creek, that eventually were used to mill the grain that was grown on the farms. So it's a really interesting history, and it goes back to the late 1600s and then up through the 1700s and the 1800s.
It's amazing. I remember attending Central School way back in the day and learning about Springfield history. It was sort of what they talked about. I remember the Blue Church was the Quaker church, and I assume that was the first Quaker church in Springfield. Do you have knowledge of that, or?
Well, actually, the first Quaker church was where the current Friends meeting is there on Springfield Road.
Okay.
And that was where they met for their meetings. And they also had a school there. And that was actually the first school in Springfield, and that was in the 1700s. My seventh great grandfather, Bartholomew Coppock, gave the land for that Friends meeting, and that was the first church and the first school. The Blue Church on Baltimore Pike came along later when Baltimore Pike became a main corridor linking Philadelphia to Baltimore.
Fascinating. So how much of Central Philadelphia do you still own, Stan? Do you own many blocks down there, or?
No, not a square inch. Now I don't know where all the money went, but it was never got to us. The Coppock family married ultimately into what my father always believed was our patriarch, Daniel James, and he actually had grown up out in the land west of Media and then moved into Springfield in the 1640s, 1650s.
So that line has been in Springfield and your family has been in there, the Johnson, would that be right?
Well, it's actually the James. The Johnsons came into it later. That was my father's roots, but the James family is the one that we identify with the most. But again, my seventh great grandfather, Bartholomew Coppock, was the original landowner in Philadelphia. So as you've done some ancestry and people watching this, the lines kind of get convoluted and you lose names as in those days. Families took the name of the male of the father, so the names kind of got lost and turned over the years. But I have my family tree, and I try to keep it updated and everything. But it really does go back to the 1300s when the families were the Irvings.
Yeah. One other name I saw in there was Pancoast. There's probably many people in your tree that have roads in Springfield named after them, I assume, right?
Well, believe it or not, there are 16 different roads in Springfield that are named after family members. There's the James Drive that comes up off of 420 there, or Woodland Avenue, and goes up into that development by the funeral home that's there. Yeah. That's James Drive. It's a short drive. It doesn't have many houses on it, but that's actually named for my ancestor, Daniel James.
Amazing. So let's jump ahead 200 years, Stan. So you were born in Springfield, I assume, in early 50s. What are some of your early memories of growing up in Springfield in the 50s and 60s?
My family lived actually on Ballymore Road there by the trolley line, right by the high school. When I was born in 1951. And then before I was 1 year old, my dad and mom bought a property over on Prospect Road, the 400 block, which is right off of Woodland Avenue. And that's where I grew up. just tremendous fond memories of growing up. Kids outside playing until the streetlights came on, so to speak, and we would just own the street. The street wasn't paved at that point; it was a gravel street. Prospect Road was.
Mm.
We used to go down to where ETR is now and play baseball down there. A bunch of the young boys, we would go down there. Um,
So was
the
that
first
school even built
memory,
yet?
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, was that school built yet? The junior high school?
No, ETR wasn't built until the 1960s, but the field was there. It had been a sanatorium for tuberculosis patients way back when, and the ground, when that facility was demolished, the ground was just pretty much flat and left, so we could play ball down there, and we'd take some kind of homemade baseball bats and baseballs and go down and just hit them out and just have a lot of fun down there playing baseball.
That's fun. Now, you said you were at a 7-year-old, you were starting with the Springfield AA. Was that an association then, or how did that come about?
Yeah, it was. We would play baseball mostly over at Seybold, which is where we went. And that's where I went to elementary school, but we played there. Some of the teams played at Central Field, the old Central School. And there were some fields at Memorial Park. Memorial Park existed back then. So depending upon what age level and what team I was on, we would play either at Seybold, Central, or Memorial Park there off of Springfield Road.
That's really cool. So then you Seybold, and then where would you have gone to a middle school or junior high school?
ETR actually just opened by the time I got to middle school age. So I went to Seybold through 5th grade and then went to ETR for 6th grade, 7th and 8th, and then went over to what they called the lower school at the time, at the high school, which was the original part of the high school, which was built in the 1930s, and then went to high school.
So I remember at one time there were no houses between the high school and the junior high school. Was that kind of before your time, or was that open?
Yeah, most of those homes there on Thorn Ridge and Leamy Avenue, Rolling Road, which is the connector between it, they were all built in the 50s, and I remember them being built. My older brother, and actually I have two older brothers, we used to go with him over to the high school because he was 6 years older than I. So we would walk by those buildings, those homes as they were being built, and fond memories, great memories.
Yeah. So then you got into the high school. What sort of things were you involved in at that point? And I assume it was ninth grade. Were you involved in sports, or what were you kind of into then?
Yeah, actually, step back a little bit. My first memory of the high school and sports dates back to when I was about 10 years old, when my dad took me over to watch my older brother Ed play a football game at Springfield High School. He was a sophomore, and I was a 10-year-old, and Ed was a very good athlete. He was a great athlete. Played football, wrestled, ran track. Tried baseball, but he could never really hit the curveball, so he didn't stay with baseball very long. But he was a great football player. He went on to be All-Delco, and he was a great wrestler. So I used to go over to the high school a lot to watch him compete. And I was still in ninth grade, elementary school, and then middle school. In terms of my own career, I started playing weight football. They had weight football teams back in those days. They had a 100-pound team and a 125-pound team, and then you moved on to the freshman team, the ninth grade team, and then the high school. I played weight football on the 125-pound team. Harry Lamont was the coach. Then I played a guard position in 7th grade, and then was a running back in 8th grade. Was captain of the team in the 8th grade. We had a really good team. We did really well. And then that was the feeder program within the schools for the ninth grade team. The best feeder programs, though, honestly, in Springfield were the old boys club and the CYO programs. at both St. Kevin's and St. Francis, and even Holy Cross to some extent. And part of the challenge for the coaching staffs in those days was to try to merge all these feeder programs into the school programs. And we had a lot of fun. We had some great athletes come from the CYO and from the boys club. So it was just a lot of fun. Ninth grade, we played on the ninth grade team. Dick Shoemaker was the coach, and he was a great coach, great gentleman. Very fond memories of Dick as both a football coach and then as our wrestling coach through the high school years. When we got to the high school as sophomores, we played for Bill McCready's, and Bill was an extraordinary coach. Very, very successful in the early 60s. My brother's team, Ed's team, was undefeated. They tied Ridley and they tied Marple in 1962. So that team was, I think they were 6-0-2. And they were the top team in what was the old Suburban 2 division. Mm-hmm. They weren't, Springfield was not that big of a high school, and then the classes were, I would say, in the vicinity of 200 students. When I graduated in the late 60s, we were 500 strong, but that growth occurred all during the 60s and then into the 70s when it then started dropping off again.
Yeah. So our women's teams have really come on in the last 40 years. I mean, what was it like early on for women's sports at Springfield in the 50s? Was it organized?
Well, that was one thing that really set Springfield apart was there was a lot of emphasis on girls' athletics back in those days, primarily due to two, I call them trailblazers. Jane Bruce was just a phenomenal coach, and she was a field hockey coach at Springfield, and she wound up scheduling anybody that would play her, private schools, Catholic schools, public schools, and they were phenomenal teams back in those days. They were undefeated as a routine, and a couple of their teams played a full season and were never scored upon. She just had a phenomenal record as a field hockey coach. Gladys Hart is another name from history, and she was the lacrosse coach, and she assisted Jane on field hockey, and then Jane assisted her on lacrosse. And she would schedule lacrosse games, again, with anybody, mostly the private schools in those days, because a lot of the public schools didn't have lacrosse. It was kind of a late developing sport for women and for men. But Springfield always had an extraordinarily successful women's program, which really set Springfield apart from the other teams that are like now in the Central League. Ridley was good in those days, but Springfield dominated Suburban 2 and those leagues, and much of it because of Jane Bruce and Gladys Hart.
Yeah, I remember hearing about those teams, and I'm going to talk to some of the women from back then. Really fascinating history and very successful.
Extremely successful, and so many of those women went on to play like on the national team, college teams, national teams. Mike Worley is the name, Mike McAllister, before she got married. Just a phenomenal athlete. Patty Kilbane Hall. She married Chuck Hall and then his brother Tom Hall. But just phenomenal athletes that came through, female athletes that came through the program at Springfield and went on to great success. Patty played at Westchester and was extraordinarily successful there.
Yeah. Was it one of the coaches you mentioned back in middle school was Mr. McCoach? Do you remember Mr. McCoach?
Yeah, Bob McCoach was my wrestling coach, and Bob was not a finesse guy. He was a take it to them with your strength and beat them at their strength. And I loved wrestling for the guy. He was great. He was assistant coach in football. He was a shop teacher at ETR. Just a great gentleman, a great guy. But not much finesse about Bob. He told you like it was. If you messed up, he told you messed up, and he really pushed us and all of our schoolmates to be the best that we could, and that's all he wanted. And he was happy when we were busting our tail because that's what he wanted us to do.
Yeah. I remember him fondly and Mr. Lamont also, both of them as teachers, Mr. Lamont in the middle school
Science, yeah,
for science, and then
yeah.
Mr. McCoach for um, metal shop, I think is what he taught at the high school. That's funny. So how are your other coaches? Do you remember? I remember Dick Shoemaker. You said Mr. McCready's was the football coach.
Yeah, Dick Shoemaker, I can't say enough about him. I believe he's still living. He's still with us.
Yeah.
He lives down at Avalon. He's a great guy. I was fortunate to go to school with his son, Skip.
Okay.
Skip was in my class at Springfield. He was a great wrestler. He went on to coach wrestling at Radnor and still active at Radnor. So I had a relationship with Coach Shoemaker as the father of one of my good friends, plus a great coach. He was extraordinarily successful as a wrestling coach at Springfield. At high school, on the football side, I had Bill McCready's. Red Gottwalls was my backfield coach, and
Hmm.
he was a coach of us as linebackers on the defensive side. We had Les Landau, he was a coach, and Ace Bell. Ace Bell, who was legendary coach on the baseball field, but he also coached football and basketball. So just extraordinary coaches in my developmental years at Springfield.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but were there any coaches or teachers that you had at Springfield that taught you lessons maybe that you moved forward? I'm sure a lot of them did. But do you remember anything in particular of of a mentor of sorts?
Well, Bill McCready's a very warm spot in my heart. I I always tried real hard, but I wasn't that great of an athlete, honestly. But I went on to play at Lafayette College in football, and I think Bill was instrumental in opening that door for me to at least introduce me to the coaching staff up at Lafayette. And our head coach there was a guy named Harry Gamble, who went on to coach at
Yeah,
Penn.
yeah.
Harry was a great guy, and I think Bill McCready's wrote me a letter and kind of opened the door for me to play at Lafayette. So that was wonderful. But probably the closest relationship I had was with Dick Shoemaker because of Skip. We used to go down to their place in Avalon, down at the shore, and Skip was a little lighter than I was. I was 160 and he or 154. I wrestled, and he wrestled at like 27, I think, 127. So I always had the size and maybe the strength advantage over Skip, but we would wrestle anytime, anywhere, and have a ball doing it.
So you also mentioned that in that class, or plus or minus one or two classes, that you're really full of great athletes at that time. And you mentioned a few of them, George Petrie, and you
Yeah,
mentioned,
when we were sophomores, we played with Chuck Hall. Chuck was a great running back at Springfield and went on to Delaware, had a great career at Delaware, and was drafted. He was drafted by the Baltimore Colts, but unfortunately he developed cancer and
mm,
passed away very young. It was so sad that Chuck met his end that way, but he was a great running back, pretty good basketball player also. Um, George Petrie was also in that class of 6 to 7. And of course, his brother was Jeff Petrie, who was a legend as a football player and as a basketball player. Went on to Princeton and then the NBA, and then went into management in the NBA at Sacramento franchise. So, yeah, it was just great to rub elbows with some of those guys. They were just legends in the history of Springfield sports and Princeton sports and NBA. It's just incredible.
yeah, it's a great history. You know, one of the things that I'm interested in beyond the sports was just kind of that the 1960s. You know, a lot of big issues in any decade, but can you describe what it was like to be kind of a younger man or person in the 1960s? JFK, you know, getting shot, MLK, Vietnam War. What were some of your thoughts or memories of that era?
Yeah, it was a very interesting and challenging time to grow up. It certainly uh, made us step back and question a lot of what we were being told and taught. Um, I was a bit sheltered, though. I think living in Springfield, honestly, I watched it on the evening news and the tragic video of the Vietnam War and all of that. Um, my dad had been in the Army during World War II, and his values were shaped certainly by that. I mentioned my older brother Ed. He was in the Air Force and was close to have been going over to Vietnam in the U.S. Air Force, but he was electrical engineer out of Duke University. He went on to Duke University, and he wound up in the Air Force going in the with the missile, the space program at that point. So he spent most of his military time in Utah. Um, but yeah, as I graduated from high school, I had to make a decision. What was I going to do? Was I going to go to high school? Was I going to enlist in the Army? What was I going to do? So I had a future kind of laid out to go to college and then make the choice. So I went to Lafayette, enrolled in ROTC, and graduated from Lafayette as a lieutenant in the U.S. Army in 1973. But by that point, the Vietnam War was winding down.
Yeah.
Military did not need officers, so they actually were rifting people out as the military effort went down. So I was certainly very much aware and faced a lot of doubts as to what about my career and what would I do. But again, somewhat shielded from it in the friendly, safe confines of Springfield. So watched it, questioned it, made decisions based on what input I had from the family and my brother and all of that.
Now, were there people from your class drafted into Vietnam, or if you didn't go to college, would you have been
Yes.
drafted?
Yep. And we had a couple classmates that died in Vietnam. A young man,
Mm,
Joe Grisafi, he died. He was in the Navy, and he died when a round misfired in the ship, and he was burned horribly, and then eventually passed away. Well, one of my dear friends from Springfield High School, Rich Stabano, uh, enlisted. He went to school, figured out college wasn't for him. He enlisted. He served 3 tours in
mm.
Vietnam. While I was at college, he was in Vietnam, and we corresponded by letters. And um, some of his stories about what was going on over there were scary and shocking and all that. Um, he came out of the Army, eventually got his college degree, um, decided he didn't really want to teach, so he became a custodian over at Springfield High School, and that was Rich Travano. So, yeah, a lot of our friends were drafted, went off to fight in Vietnam. Um, by the time I came out and would have gone into the service, they didn't need us anymore. They didn't need officers. They were downsizing the military at that point. So I never had to serve. I wound up serving in the Army. I was at Aberdeen, Maryland. Again, my electrical engineering degree, they wanted to use us in weaponry and armaments. And that's what I did when I was in the Army at Aberdeen. And then I was served in the reserves for 8 years.
Nice. Thank you for your service, Stan.
Way back when.
Yeah. Now, talk about your career. Pico, was it that you had your career, Stan? Or
Yeah, after I finished at Lafayette, I guess just a little bit about Lafayette. I played football up there, but I was pretty undersized for Division One football. I only weighed about 160, 165 pounds. Played outside linebacker and strong safety at Lafayette on the freshman team, but it really took its toll on my shoulders. I wound up getting stretched nerves, actually in both shoulders. The right was the worst. And every time I tackle somebody, my arm would go numb. And I went to the doctors, and they said, well, with stretched nerves, there's not a whole lot you can do. You can wear a collar, which I did, but I still would lose feeling in my arms, I had to give up football at college when I was at the end of my freshman year. I completed my college in 4 years, graduated in '73, went to work at Pico Energy as electrical engineer. Worked out on the street with the line crews, the guys that put in the poles and string the wires and all that. Of course, I designed that, and they would build what I designed. At least most of the time, they built what I designed, and had a lot of fun. Great career. Was there for 30 years. Progressed my way up in management. Was actually responsible for all of the electrical facilities in Delaware and Chester counties in the early 2000s, and then Pico went through a whole bunch of changes, organizational changes. They merged with a company in Chicago, Exelon Energy, and I eventually was rifted out of Pico in 2003, and then went to work for a consulting company in Princeton, New Jersey, electrical engineering consulting company. Worked there for about 10 years, retired from there, and then worked at Phoenixville Area School District up in Chester County for about 10 years. Worked as the job that Don Moody had, where you're director of kind of everything except the academics. I didn't have the qualifications to be involved in the academics, but I did the budgeting, the busing, the buildings, all of that for Phoenixville, and really enjoyed that. That was the job that put a lot of my skills together. I was on the school board here, as you mentioned, for 28 years, and I interfaced directly with members of the school board as they went through the difficult job of trying to rebuild the educational system in Phoenixville. Phoenixville had been dependent on the steel mills up there for many, many years. When the steel mills closed, as they closed almost across the state of Pennsylvania, their tax issues became really difficult. But Phoenixville is a beautiful place, and it has really turned around. And I take pride in having played a small role in that. And now Phoenixville is really a go-to location. It's a wonderful place. A lot of people go up there for Friday nights, Saturday nights. It's a really fun place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been up there. It is very nice. Nice restaurants and great vibe
Absolutely.
in Phoenixville. So let's talk about how you got involved with the school district of Springfield. That was in 1978, I think you said you started.
Yeah, 77, 78. The person who had been elected to the school board had to move, so there was a vacancy, and I had known some of the people on the board, so they gave me a call and they said, would you be interested in being appointed to the board? You'd have to run at the next election. And I said, well, I'm pretty young. I don't have any kids in the schools yet. And they said, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for young people. We see Springfield changing a lot. A lot of younger families are moving in. Would you be interested in at least being interviewed? So I took the interview, and they selected me, much to my surprise. And I started serving on the board. It was one of the most rewarding experiences in my life. I always put a heavy value on education. Certainly my family did. All four of us kids went on to college and all that. Ed went to Duke. My middle brother went to University of Maine. I went to Lafayette. My sister went to Newman. So education was just a priority in our house. So I tried to carry that through. We had just some wonderful experiences. Again, it's a team effort, though. No individual board member can really influence the decisions. The decisions are made collaboratively. And we had a great board. You mentioned Don Cadge earlier. Don came on the board. Doug Carney, Bob Pfeiffer, a high school classmate of mine, came on the school board. Jerry Sullivan, she was just a tremendous addition to the board. We had lots of board members over the years. We recognized that we had to do something about the facilities in the district. The elementary schools were getting a little long at the teeth. They were built in the 50s. At that point, they were coming to be like 20, 30 years old. Engineering or education technology was changing dramatically. Computers were starting to come in. So there's just a tremendous amount that needed to be done to bring our schools up to standard. if when I first got on the board, enrollment was actually declining. So we had to face some decisions about Oakdale School and the old Central School. And we went through a lot to eventually close those schools. Central School was a much beloved school in the community, but physically it was a wreck. There was not a piece of steel in that whole building. It was all wood and stone.
Yeah.
And if you may remember, if you walked on the floors there, they would creak and they would move, they would bounce. So we had an engineering studies, actually several of them done. What would it cost to bring this building up to current codes, fire codes, technology codes, and all the analysis came back. Best thing is to knock it down. So against a lot of resistance in the community, and we understood the resistance. We loved the school too, but it'd been built in the 20s with all wood beams, not a stitch of steel in the place, and it just wouldn't hold up. So that was
I have great memories of Central School. I still have dreams about Central School. Like, I'll just remember walking the halls. I just remember kind of the big windows that they had. I remember tall ceilings, all wood. I remember like the fallout shelter. Was that a thing back then?
Yep, there was a fallout shelter there, and that would never pass muster because everything above it was going to fall into it and probably would have crushed whoever was in there. Much beloved school, and I certainly understood that, but the time had come to start shrinking the number of classrooms because we didn't need them. The family size was shrinking. A lot of families that had children in the 50s and 60s, they were beyond childbearing age. So enrollment started dropping off in the 70s and never really recovered until the turn of the century when us baby boomers started having children in the 80s and 90s.
What were some of the issues at the high school post-fire, would you say? Like the fire of, what year would that have been?
78.
78.
Yeah.
So you were right on the board when that happened. What are some of your memories about the fire?
Believe it or not, I was actually at the fire. I was responding to a call to PICO. I was an emergency responder for PICO at the time, and when you had large fires like that, you had to shut the power off in the whole neighborhood to protect the firemen so they wouldn't get hurt, get electrocuted, and you had to safely try to re-energize the neighborhood, bring the people's lights back on. So I was there and watched the fire, and it was heartbreaking. It was really horrible to see that. And of course, that was arson. That was a set fire. We were never able to prosecute the kid or successfully prosecute the young person that did that. But we then had to decide, okay, what are we going to do with what's left, which was the shell of the building. And at that time, we didn't need classrooms at the high school because there had been a wing put on in the 1970s, the 70s wing, and that provided more than enough classrooms. So that area, the fire-damaged area, was cleaned out. We tried to preserve the walls as much as we could, and was made into the gym and administrative space. New regulations in education were requiring additional front office staff, so that's what that area was rebuilt to do, was to provide the administration for the building. The administration previously had been over on the other side of the building and actually sprinkled throughout the building, but we were able to consolidate the administration into that area that we rebuilt after the fire.
So that must have been a horrific time, or a challenging time, to better put, to be on the school board. There were many decisions to be made about what will happen next, where the students were going to be and where the funding would come and insurance, et cetera. I mean, all those kind of things, correct?
Absolutely. It was a very challenging time, but we had a good, hard-working board that worked through the things. We had limited funds. We had a fight with the insurance company to get paid because there were, arson phrases in the policy which said we wouldn't get paid. But we said, we'll take you to court if you don't pay us back what we insured. And eventually it was resolved. We looked at that point at whether there was enough life left in the untouched portion of the high school. Should we have looked at rebuilding that portion? Because there were some fundamental problems with dear old Springfield High School, and they were well known even at that point. The steam system in the 1950s, when the building was built, was a steam heating system, which is what large buildings had back in those days. After World War II, that was the common way that large buildings were heated. But that was difficult to operate and very difficult to maintain. So it had been changed over to a hot water system to heat the building. Of course, the building was never air conditioned, so that was a real problem as we moved into the 1990s and 2000s. And the biggest problem with the building, the roof deck was loaded with asbestos.
Right.
And asbestos was at that point recognized to be a health hazard. As long as you kept it where it was and contained, it was okay. But once it got wet and you lost containment on the asbestos and the fibers became airborne, it was really dangerous. So we were really careful about how we maintained that building, particularly the roof area of the building. I'll call it the populated areas of the building. We did everything we could to mitigate the asbestos. We removed as much as we could. We contained as much as we could. But when the opportunity presented itself eventually to replace that high school, it was a difficult choice, a difficult challenge. It turned out to be probably the best thing that ever happened, though, because the result was a really good new high school that was finished finally in 2020. And it's kind of state of the art, and it's still a state of the art. You can walk one end of that building to the other with a laptop and never lose signal. And the classrooms are far better than what you and I went to at Springfield High School. So, long answer to your question, Ted, but yeah, we worked really hard to build a school that the community could be proud of, and we think we're there. The literacy center that we built was really state of the art, and still is state of the art. The faculty and the principals, they do a fabulous job there. But when you go there, you can just feel the energy. The kids just love that building.
So talk about that for a little bit. Is that the building that's adjacent to the middle school? Is that what the literacy center? Is that where that is?
That's correct, and it's for our kindergartners and first graders. And
okay.
The whole academic idea there is you never can become a well-rounded student and learn what you need to learn until you learn how to read. Reading is the fundamental skill that you have to learn. And we worked with Kathy Simpson and a number of the teachers at the elementary levels at Sable and at Scenic and said, if you could have your dream classroom, what would it look like? And they worked with our facilities committee, and they helped us design a building that you actually don't need to turn a light switch on ever. It's all natural lighting, and study after study has shown that's the best lighting for a classroom is natural lighting. And we try to draw in the sunlight into that building in every single space, every classroom, every office, the cafeteria, everything, natural lighting. So that building has accomplished pretty much everything that we wanted it to. The reading scores in the district took off, and they still are very high. We expect that the other subjects, the math, the science, they will come later. But as long as the kids can read, they can learn it. They can absorb the concepts. But you got to teach the kids to read. And that's the focus at the Literacy Center.
Yeah. And I imagine that type of success really drives what Springfield is now, a desirable place to grow a family and to send them to great schools.
To some extent, it's always been that way. Springfield was always a great place to raise a family, raised me, raised you, all of that. But we did believe in the motto that if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And we have seen a marked increase in the number of students at Springfield. I mean, a lot of factors for that, but one of them is the Literacy Center. And then while we were doing that, we upgraded Saybold and Scenic. They're all air conditioned now, and so is ETR. So we have tried over the years to upgrade, update buildings. They all have much improved technology, facilities at Saybold, Scenic, and ETR. So it takes a lot of time, energy, and investment to build the kind of facilities that you can be proud of for a school district like Springfield. And you know, you're never done, you never finish, but a lot of really good work has been done by the administration and by the school board, and certainly by the community. The community has worked really well. I can compare that to my experience in Phoenixville. In Phoenixville, we had great support because Phoenixville was very definitely a community on the rise after all the difficulties they had when the mills closed. But that's what makes a school district really work and be special, is when you can get the faculty and the students and the parents and the administration to work together. It's remarkable what can be accomplished.
Yeah, agreed. And the fact of Springfield High School, the new Springfield High School, is just kind of an exclamation point on the end of your, I don't mean the end of your service, but the end of your service on the school board is amazing. That place is just the academics, the athletic fields, just all top notch in Delaware County, certainly, if not the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, really proud of it. You mentioned the facilities committee. One guy I have to give credit to is Doug Carney. Doug is a genius with design and architecture. When the committee was actually doing the final work on the design of the high school, I was fully occupied at Phoenixville, so I wasn't able to be involved in a lot of those sessions. But the product speaks for itself. It's a great product. I've had the pleasure of taking many groups tours through that product, and they're in awe. They're amazed at what we were able to accomplish there. And many of the principles that we used at the Literacy Center about natural light and create open spaces, we did that at the high school too. And that was one of the design fundamentals that we insisted. And we used a local architect for much of that, David Schrader's company. But we also used a company in Chicago, and I'm drawing a blank on their name now, but they were extraordinary. They were designing some of the best high schools in the entire country, and they looked at ours and they said, "You're almost there, but why don't you consider this and consider that?" And they were phenomenal to work with.
Yeah, I can imagine getting it over the finish line with funding and building and all that sort of stuff must have been challenging.
It was, and then you throw in the pandemic towards the end of the process when the governor said, "Sorry, you got to shut everything down." Our contractors actually did a very good job stopping and then restarting, and that's not easy to stop a construction project and then restart, but they did a phenomenal job. I've got to throw in a commendation to Don Mooney. Don did a phenomenal job at that high school. And we also honestly really lucked out with what happened to interest rates. When we started that project, we assumed that we would be borrowing the money for that building and paying it back over 30 years at around 4%, which is what a community like Springfield has to pay for money to borrow it. Of course, during the pandemic, interest rates went into the basement. So we were able to refinance that and borrow that money at less than 1%. So just imagine the savings on $100+ million of borrowing, not at 4%, but at 1%. And Don did that masterfully. And we had financial consultants and all of that, but But Don Mooney just did a phenomenal job with
Great
that,
time.
refinancing it and borrowing that money. And that project came in under budget. Not many public projects come in under budget, but great work by the board and by Don Mooney. It came in under budget, and that money was then used to air condition Saybold and Scenic and part of ETR. We had to borrow a little bit more to air condition ETR, but it was needed. I mean, today's kids, they expect air conditioning, and their parents expect air conditioning. And we fortunately were able to come in under budget for the high school project and use those funds to help Saybold, Scenic, and ETR.
That's a great story. Those kids are soft, Stan. They don't know what it's like to sit in the school all day and sweat.
It's true, but I'm sure it adversely affects the learning process when you feel your underarms getting wet and the sweat rolling down your chest. It's not pleasant.
Nah, I'm half kidding there, but so not only do you talk the talk, Stan, but you walk the walk. Your kids went through Springfield, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking about your children and them growing up in Springfield and attending Springfield schools.
Yeah, we were blessed with 3 children. Dana was born in 1982, Tara in 1985, and Shane in 1987. They went through the elementary school program to the high school program. They all did really well. Pretty balanced kids, as it happens. They were, no surprise, they were athletic. And my wife, Carol, was an athlete at Cardinal O'Hara. She graduated in '72 from O'Hara. She was a field hockey player. Back in those years, the O'Hara women's basketball program was known nationwide. And she was the last one cut before the season on the girls' basketball program at O'Hara. So she was a very good athlete. She went on to play CYO. And our kids picked that up. And Dana and Tara and Shane were all really good athletes. Dana ran cross country. She played basketball at Springfield with Coach Kim Caffey Smith. And then she played lacrosse. And Keith Broom and Mike Worley and all those great coaches. And she went on to Ithaca College. She was an All-American there at Ithaca. Captain her junior and senior years. Just a wonderful career at Ithaca. Tara played soccer at Springfield. Played basketball for a few years, but then lacrosse. She played lacrosse 4 years at American U. She was captain her junior and senior year at AU. That's in the Patriot League, which is a really fine league academically and athletically. Shane played soccer at Springfield. He in the winter he dabbled with swimming and then basketball. He was pretty short like I am, so he didn't last long on the basketball court. And then he wrestled for his junior and senior years, and then went on to Cabrini College and played soccer at Cabrini. So great satisfaction with our kids going through Springfield. Academically, Tara was probably the stronger student, but did really well at AU. Went on and got her master's from George Washington University in D.C. Dana got her master's degree from University of South Carolina. So yeah, they all have their master's degrees. They've all done extremely well.
That's great to hear. So, Stan, is there anything else as we come to the end of the podcast here that you'd like to talk about necessarily?
Well, just a couple thoughts about the Springfield Area Education Foundation, SAFE. Believe it or not, it was founded in 2005. It's over 20 years old now. And it was founded to try to find a way that we could raise money and build the lights on the varsity stadium at the old high school. And a group of us got together and said, let's create an education foundation. So we were able to do that. We were able to raise funds, built the lights, and those lights, of course, now exist on the new stadium field. We had some resistance in the community. It was a challenge in court, but we persevered, and with good legal representation, we eventually got it there. The high school predated most of the homes there, so we leaned heavily on that argument that hey, the high school was there.
Yeah, you knew what
And
you were getting into.
that's right. And in the 2000s, almost all the high schools in the Central League all had night football. The only one that didn't was Lower Merion, and Lower Merion's kind of an outlier in a lot of ways. Um, the other thing that we did right away, as soon as we formed SAFE, was we bought new uniforms for the band. The band parents were struggling trying to raise the money with some help from the district, taxpayer money, but we made a major contribution for that, so that happened. Then the focus of SAFE has transitioned over the years more towards scholarships for kids graduating from Springfield. We know college is very expensive. So through some various generous donors, we donate about $180,000 to every senior class that graduates from Springfield. Some of those scholarships are funded by families in honor of loved ones that have passed away. We've had some very generous donors from like Mike Sosha, who went on to achieve great success after he left Springfield. He's very generous. Mike does a wonderful job. Mike Michelson, who was in my class, he gave a huge amount in honor of his father, Max Michelson. So we have some scholarships that families have donated, and we raise funds every year to provide scholarships for kids that leave Springfield and go on to college.
That's great work. I'm familiar with them, and it's certainly a great amount of money that you guys have offered to the Springfield High School and ongoing. I imagine you guys have a website. If there's something one of our people want to get on the website, they can go to SAFE
Just look
and learn about it.
SAEF. It's there. Lisa Smith is our director of development, and she will contact anybody who's interested and let them know how they can give money, tax deductible, to fund a scholarship they want, or as we call it, undesignated money. So it's not designated for a specific scholarship, but it helps us with that. We also fund some programs for current students. We provide funding for after-school tutoring for kids that are struggling a little bit, elementary or middle school, and we provide funding for that after-school tutoring program. That has helped a lot of kids who are still in K to 12, and they need some additional time with teachers, and we help pay the salary for the teachers that stay late and work with some of those kids.
Outstanding. And I know there's more than one event you guys have per year to raise money. Participate in the golf
We
outing.
have a golf outing every year. It's our biggest single fundraiser. Steve and Lisa Tadaro do a fantastic job with that. I don't know what we do without Steve and Lisa. They signed on to run the golf tournament. They said they would do it for 5 years, and we're now at like year 17 with them doing it. But they do a fabulous job, and it's a great event. It's a wonderful event. It's in the spring. It's on the website. You can look at the date. We get a great turnout of alumni at that. Rolling Green does a wonderful job hosting that. So yeah, we try to raise money to pay for the scholarships.
That's outstanding. Well, Stan, I'll leave that with this. Springfield Township and High School, Morton Borough is lucky to have you and your history and all the service you provided to Springfield High School. So I'll thank, on behalf of all those people, you for your service. And do you want to leave us with any other words here, Stan?
Well, I'll sign off the way we sign off all of our broadcasts. Let's go Cougars.
Let's go Cougars. All right, thanks so much, Stan. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ted. See ya.